The mottled light of dawn barely pierced through my bedroom curtains when my phone's insistent buzzing jolted me awake. I fumbled on the nightstand, squinting at the screen's harsh glow. 3 missed calls from St. Elizabeth's Hospital, followed by a text that made my stomach drop. Your mother has been admitted. Critical condition. My name is Cassandra Fleming, and I spent 32 years of my life being the daughter my mother never wanted. I threw on clothes with mechanical efficiency, my mind racing through facts I'd long accepted. Malcolm was her golden child, her perfect firstborn. I was the afterthought, the consolation prize. For years I had watched her eyes light up when he entered a room, while mine warranted barely a flicker of acknowledgement. The hospital corridor stretched before me like a gauntlet as I rushed through the antiseptic-scented air, my heart hammering against my ribs. A nurse directed me to the ICU where I found her, Diana Fleming, the woman who had raised me with meticulous detachment, now reduced to a fragile form among tubes and beeping monitors. Cardiac event, the doctor explained, his voice clinical yet kind. We've stabilized her, but the next 24 hours are critical. Is there other family we should contact? Her son, I said automatically, the words bitter on my tongue. Malcolm. I'll call him. The doctor nodded and left me alone with the rhythmic beeping of machines. I sank into the vinyl chair beside her bed, studying the pale face that had rarely softened for me. Even unconscious, her features held that familiar severity, the slight furrow between her brows, the downturned corners of her mouth. I wondered if she was dreaming of him. I pulled out my phone and dialed Malcolm's number, already knowing what would happen. The call went straight to voicemail, just as it had for the past 3 weeks. My perfect brother had vanished after draining our mother's bank accounts. Malcolm, I said after the beep, my voice steadier than I felt. Mom's in the hospital. Heart attack. It's serious. Call me back. I knew he wouldn't. 3 hours later, a nurse brought me lukewarm coffee in a paper cup. Any word from your brother? She asked, clearly having overheard my earlier conversations with the staff. I shook my head. He's unavailable. That's too bad. Family should be together at times like this. She patted my shoulder sympathetically before continuing her rounds, oblivious to the irony of her words. Family. What a loaded term for the 3 of us. My mother's eyelids fluttered, and I leaned forward, holding my breath. Her gaze, cloudy with medication, finally focused on my face. Malcolm, she whispered, hope coloring that single word. I swallowed the familiar ache. No, Mom. It's Cassandra. Disappointment washed over her features before she could mask it. Even at death's door, her preferences remained unchanged. Where's your brother? She asked, her voice raspy. I hesitated, weighing truths against comfort. I've called him. He's not answering. She closed her eyes, a single tear escaping down her weathered cheek. He'll come. He always does. Except he wouldn't. Not this time. Not after what he'd done. I sat back in the chair, memories flooding unbidden. Malcolm at 18, high school valedictorian, Mom beaming from the front row while I applauded from my seat in the orchestra pit, my years of playing first-chair violin meriting only a distracted "that's nice, dear" from her. Malcolm's college graduation, where she threw an extravagant party despite our tight finances. My master's degree, which she acknowledged with a card containing a $20 bill and a generic message. The pattern was set early. Malcolm charmed, I achieved. Malcolm took, I gave. Malcolm broke things, I fixed them. It had always been that way, until 3 weeks ago, when Malcolm broke something I couldn't fix. The memory of that night crystallized in my mind, Mom's frantic call, her voice wavering between anger and disbelief. "Your brother, he's taken everything. My savings, my retirement, everything." I'd rushed to her house to find her clutching bank statements, her hands trembling. "There must be some mistake," she kept saying. "Malcolm wouldn't do this to me." But he had. $500,000, gone. Malcolm, gone. And still, even then, she couldn't see it, couldn't accept that her precious son had betrayed her while her perpetually overlooked daughter stood ready to help pick up the pieces. I was pulled from my thoughts as the heart monitor's steady rhythm suddenly accelerated. My mother's face contorted in pain, her back arching against the mattress. "Nurse!" I screamed, lunging for the call button. "Help! Something's wrong." The room erupted in controlled chaos, doctors shouting orders, nurses adjusting IVs and machines. I was ushered into the hallway, where I paced anxiously, my nails digging crescents into my palms. Minutes stretched into an hour before the doctor emerged, his expression grave. "We've stabilized her again, but she's weaker." "Has your brother arrived?" I shook my head, unable to form words around the lump in my throat. "Ms. Fleming," he said gently, "I don't want to alarm you, but your mother needs surgery, immediately. Her heart won't withstand another event like this. There are forms that need signing, decisions to be made." His words faded into background noise as realization washed over me. This wasn't supposed to be my responsibility. Mom had always made it clear, Malcolm was her emergency contact, her healthcare proxy, her everything. I was the backup, the afterthought. But Malcolm wasn't here. Only me. The daughter she'd never wanted was now the only one standing between her and death. I took the clipboard with trembling hands. "Tell me what she needs." The doctor outlined the procedure, a high-risk cardiac surgery with significant complications possible. As her legal next of kin, I would need to authorize everything from blood transfusions to resuscitation measures. "I understand," I said, signing my name on line after line. "Do whatever it takes to save her." As the doctor hurried back to prepare, my phone buzzed. For a fleeting moment, hope flared, maybe Malcolm had finally responded. Instead, it was a text from my boss, "Cassandra, where are you? The Whitmore presentation is in an hour." Reality crashed down. I'd completely forgotten about the biggest client meeting of the quarter. The presentation I'd spent weeks preparing, the one that could lead to my promotion, was about to start without me. I texted back, "Family emergency. I can't make it. Use the backup slides in my shared folder." The response was immediate, "This is unacceptable. The Whitmores specifically requested you." I stared at the message, a strange calm settling over me. For years, I'd been the reliable one, at work, with friends, in the shadow of Malcolm's chaos. I'd never missed a meeting, never called in sick, never prioritized myself over my obligations. Until now. "I'm sorry," I typed, my fingers steady. "My mother is having emergency heart surgery. The Whitmores will have to understand." I put my phone on silent and slipped it into my bag. Whatever consequences awaited at work, they would have to wait. For once in my life, I was exactly where I needed to be, even if I wasn't wanted. The surgery lasted 5 hours. I sat in the waiting room, alternating between desperate prayers and furious attempts to reach Malcolm. His phone remained off, his social media dark. I'd called every friend of his I could remember, but no one had heard from him in weeks. "He's gone," I whispered to myself, the truth finally settling in my bones. "He took the money and ran." A gentle hand on my shoulder startled me. It was the surgeon, his scrub speckled with blood, my mother's blood. "Miss Fleming," he said, his face revealing nothing. "Your mother made it through the surgery." Relief flooded me, making my knees weak. "She's going to be okay?" "The next 48 hours are critical, but yes, I believe she has a good chance." He paused, his expression softening. "She's very lucky you were here to authorize the procedure when you did. Without immediate intervention, she wouldn't have survived the night." The weight of his words settled around me. I had saved her life, me, the daughter she had always overlooked. "Can I see her?" I asked. He nodded. "Briefly. She's still unconscious from the anesthesia." I followed him to the recovery room, where my mother lay surrounded by even more machines than before. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, her skin ashen against the white sheets. I took her hand, surprised by how small and fragile it felt in mine. "I'm here, Mom," I whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." As if in response, her fingers twitched slightly in my grasp. Days blended together as I kept vigil by her bedside. I worked remotely when possible, fielding increasingly terse emails from my frustrated boss. Friends brought changes of clothes and real food to replace the vending machine meals I'd been subsisting on. Through it all, Malcolm remained a ghost, present only in my mother's first question each time she woke: "Has Malcolm called?" Each time, I shook my head, watching disappointment cloud her eyes before she drifted back to sleep. On the fourth day, as I was helping her take small sips of water, she fixed me with a gaze more lucid than she'd managed since the surgery. "He's not coming, is he?" she asked softly. I set the cup down, choosing my words carefully. "I don't think so, Mom." She nodded slowly, pain etching deeper lines around her mouth. "The money. It's really gone?" "Yes. All of it." She closed her eyes, a tear escaping down her temple and disappearing into her gray hair. "How could he do this to me? After everything I've given him?" The words cut through me like glass. Even now, it was about Malcolm, what he had taken, how he had hurt her. Not a word about what I had given, how I had helped. "I don't know, Mom," I said, fighting to keep the bitterness from my voice. "Malcolm has always taken what he wanted." She opened her eyes, studying me with an intensity that made me want to look away. "You've always resented him, haven't you?" The question caught me off guard. In all our years, she had never acknowledged the obvious disparity in how she treated us. "No," I said finally. "I've always resented how you loved him more than me." The words hung between us, raw and honest in a way we'd never been. I expected anger, denial, or the cold shutdown that had greeted my childhood attempts at emotional connection. Instead, something unexpected happened. She cried. Not the delicate, controlled tears of disappointment she'd shed over Malcolm's betrayal, but deep, body-racking sobs that set off alarms on her heart monitor. I panicked, reaching for the call button, but she grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "No," she gasped between sobs. Let me say this." I froze, caught between concern for her physical state and desperate curiosity about what could possibly be so important. She struggled to compose herself, each breath clearly painful against her surgical wounds. "You're right," she whispered finally. "I did love him more. And I was wrong." The admission stunned me into silence. For 32 years, I had lived with the unspoken truth of my secondary status in her heart. Hearing her acknowledge it felt simultaneously validating and devastating. "Why?" The question escaped before I could stop it, childlike in its simplicity. She looked away, her gaze fixing on the window where afternoon light cast long shadows across the room. "He reminded me of your father," she said softly. "Not just his looks, but his charm, his easy way with people. When James died, She trailed off, tears flowing freely now. "I had been 5 when my father died in a car accident, Malcolm 7. My memories of him were fragmented, a deep laugh, strong hands lifting me high, the smell of mint and aftershave. For my mother, losing him had clearly been the dividing line of her life. I couldn't bear to lose those pieces of him," she continued. "So I clung to Malcolm, protected him, excused his behavior. And in doing so, I failed you both." The monitors beeped steadily, punctuating the heavy silence that followed her confession. "You never talked about Dad," I said finally. "Not with me." A sad smile touched her lips. "You were too much like me, stubborn, practical, loyal to a fault. It was easier to keep my distance than to see myself reflected in you, all my weaknesses and fears laid bare." I sat back, processing her words. All these years, I'd assumed her emotional distance stemmed from some inherent failing of mine, something fundamental that made me less lovable than my brother. The revelation that it had nothing to do with me, but rather her own inability to face herself, left me reeling. "That's not fair," I said finally, years of repressed anger bubbling to the surface. "You punished me for being like you, while rewarding Malcolm for being like Dad. Even when it was obvious that he was using you, taking advantage." "I know," she interrupted, her voice barely audible. "I know what he is. What he's become. I just couldn't stop seeing what I wanted to see." She reached for my hand, her fingers cool against my skin. "But I see you now, Cassandra. I see what you've done, staying here, authorizing the surgery. The doctor told me, he told me I wouldn't have survived without your quick decision." "You're my mother," I said simply. "Of course I stayed. Even after everything? All the birthdays I missed because I was at Malcolm's games, all the achievements I downplayed, all the times I chose him over you." Her voice broke. "Why would you still care what happens to me?" The question hit me hard. Why did I care? Why hadn't I walked away years ago, left her to the consequences of her blind devotion to Malcolm? The answer came to me with startling clarity. "Because unlike Malcolm, I actually love you," I said. "Not what you can give me, not what you represent. Just you. Even when you break my heart." The monitor tracking her heart rate spiked, then settled into a slightly faster rhythm. She clutched my hand tighter, bringing it to her lips in a gesture so tender it made my breath catch. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," she whispered against my knuckles. "Probably not," I agreed, a small smile tugging at my lips. "But you have it anyway. It's what families are supposed to do, forgive each other, be there for each other." "You're teaching me what family means," she said, wonder coloring her voice. "My own daughter." A nurse appeared in the doorway, frowning at the monitors. "Everything okay in here?" "Your heart rate's elevated, Mrs. Fleming." My mother didn't release my hand. "I'm fine. Better than I've been in years, actually." The nurse seemed skeptical but nodded. "Just try to stay calm. Your heart needs rest." After she left, my mother's expression turned serious again. "What am I going to do, Cassandra?" "The money's gone. The house was remortgaged to pay for Malcolm's so-called business ventures. I have nothing." The practical concerns she raised were valid, but I found myself smiling. For the first time in my life, she was turning to me for solutions, not Malcolm. "We'll figure it out," I said confidently. "I have savings. My apartment has a second bedroom that's just gathering dust. Once you're discharged, you can stay with me while we sort things out. She stared at me, disbelief evident in her eyes. You would do that? After everything? Like I said, it's what family does. Your brother wouldn't, she said, a new rawness in her voice. He'd tell me I brought this on myself. Well, I'm not Malcolm. No, she agreed, squeezing my hand. You're much better. The admission, so simple, yet so profound, washed over me like a baptism. All my life, I had longed to hear those words, to be recognized as valuable in my own right, not constantly measured against my brother and found wanting. I need you to promise me something, she said suddenly. What? When Malcolm comes back, and he will, once the money runs out, don't let me fall back into old patterns. Remind me of this moment, of this clarity. Don't let me forget what he did. What I did. I studied her face, searching for signs that this was just another manipulation, another way to center Malcolm in our lives. But all I saw was genuine remorse and fragile hope. I promise, I said finally. But I'm not sure I believe he'll come back. She shook her head, a sad wisdom in her eyes. He will. People like Malcolm always do, when they need something. And I need to be stronger when he does. We sat in contemplative silence, the machines keeping steady rhythm with our breathing. Something fundamental had shifted between us, a recalibration of our roles, a tentative bridge across decades of emotional distance. I'm tired, she said eventually, her eyelids drooping. Get some rest. I'll be here when you wake up. As she drifted off to sleep, still holding my hand, I felt a strange peace settle over me. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, rebuilding trust never is. But for the first time, I believed it might be possible. 2 days later, the doctors deemed my mother stable enough to be moved out of the ICU. As I helped her settle into her new room, a text message lit up my phone. Unknown number, is Mom okay? Heard she's in the hospital. M. I stared at the screen, blood rushing in my ears. After weeks of silence, after stealing her life savings and disappearing without a trace, he had the audacity to ask if she was okay. My mother noticed my expression. What is it? What's wrong? I hesitated, then turned the phone so she could see the message. Her face paled, fingers clutching the thin hospital blanket. Malcolm, she whispered, and I couldn't miss the flicker of hope that crossed her features, however quickly she tried to suppress it. Do you want me to respond? I asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral. She closed her eyes, visibly struggling with herself. The old Diana would have demanded immediate contact, would have made excuses for his absence, would have welcomed him back with open arms despite his betrayal. This new, still fragile version of my mother took a deep breath and shook her head. Not yet. First, I need to get stronger, physically and emotionally. Pride swelled in my chest. That's a good decision, Mom. Is it? Uncertainty clouded her face. He's still my son. I still love him, despite everything. I know, I said gently. And eventually, you'll figure out what kind of relationship you can have with him that doesn't destroy you. But right now, you need to focus on healing. She nodded slowly. You're right. But can you at least let him know I'm alive? That's all. I considered her request, measuring her need against my anger at Malcolm. Finally, I typed a brief response. She survived emergency heart surgery. Recovering now. No invitation to visit, no details about her condition, no assurance that she was anxious to see him. Just the bare facts, Malcolm replied almost immediately, "Thank God." "Where is she? I want to come see her." I showed the message to my mother, watching her reaction carefully. The internal struggle was evident on her face, the ingrained impulse to embrace him warring with the fresh wound of his betrayal. "Tell him." She swallowed hard. "Tell him I'm not ready to see him yet." I didn't try to hide my surprise. "Are you sure?" She nodded, more conviction in her eyes now. "For the first time in my life, I'm thinking clearly about Malcolm. About what's best for me, not just what he wants." I squeezed her hand, hoping she could feel my pride in her strength. Then I typed the message. "She's not ready to see you yet. She needs time." His response was predictably self-centered, but I need to explain. "She doesn't understand what happened." Before I could reply, another message followed. "I bet this is your doing. You've always been jealous of my relationship with Mom." And there it was, the familiar deflection, the blame shifting that had characterized our entire childhood. Any wrongdoing on Malcolm's part was immediately reframed as someone else's fault, usually mine. I showed the messages to my mother without comment. She read them, her face crumpling slightly, then straightened her shoulders with visible effort. "May I?" she asked, holding out her hand for the phone. I hesitated. "Are you sure? You don't have to do this now." "I'm sure." Her voice was steady. "I need to do this myself." I handed her the phone, watching as she slowly typed a response with one finger. "Malcolm, this is your mother. What you did broke my heart in ways I'm still trying to understand. I nearly died, and you were nowhere to be found. Your sister saved my life while you were spending my retirement money. I love you, but I need time to heal, from surgery and from your betrayal. Please respect that." She handed the phone back to me, her hands trembling but her eyes clear. "Send it." I did, then set the phone aside, giving her my full attention. "How do you feel?" A single tear slipped down her cheek. "Like I'm grieving. Not just the money, but the illusion I had of who my son was. Who I was as a mother." She looked at me, guilt shadowing her face. "I failed you both, but in different ways. I spoiled him until he believed he was entitled to whatever he wanted, and I neglected you until you believed you weren't worthy of love." The blunt assessment of our dysfunctional family dynamic hit me like a physical blow. "Mom." "No, let me finish," she insisted. "I need to say this. For years, I was blind to what was right in front of me. Malcolm took and took, while you gave and gave. I convinced myself it was because he needed more, but the truth is, I just found it easier to love the child who demanded less of me emotionally." Her raw honesty left me speechless. All these years, I'd assumed her preference for Malcolm stemmed from some inherent quality he possessed that I lacked. The revelation that it was actually about her own emotional limitations, her inability to engage with a child who reflected her own complexities, was both painful and liberating. "I can't change the past," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "But I can try to do better now. If you'll let me." The phone buzzed again, drawing both our attention. Malcolm had replied. "That's not fair. You don't know what I've been going through. I had investments that couldn't wait. I was going to pay you back double once they matured. But fine, take Cassandra's side like you always do lately. I'll stay away if that's what you want." I bit back a bitter laugh at his audacity, claiming I was the favored child when every moment of our lives had proved the opposite. But more shocking was his blatant lie about investments and repayment. My mother read the message, a strange calm settling over her features. "Turn off the phone," Please. I don't want to hear from him again today. I complied, then sat beside her on the narrow hospital bed, carefully avoiding the 4 lines. Are you okay? No, she admitted. But I think I will be. Eventually. We sat in companionable silence for a while, the afternoon sun casting warm patterns across the sterile room. Cassandra, she said finally. Yes? Thank you. Not just for staying with me, for making the hard decisions when I couldn't, but for being the person you are. Someone I can depend on. The words washed over me, filling cracks I hadn't realized were still open and aching. All my life, I had craved this acknowledgement, not just of what I did, but of who I was at my core. You're welcome, Mom, I said softly. That's what family is for. Is it? She asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. I've never really known what family is supposed to be. My own parents were. She trailed off, then shook her head. Well, that's a conversation for another day. I realized with a start that I knew almost nothing about my mother's childhood. She had always been so private, so self-contained. The idea that there might be context for her behavior, patterns she was repeating without even realizing it, opened up new avenues of understanding. I'd like to hear about them sometime, I said. When you're ready. She nodded, a small smile touching her lips. I'd like that too. In the weeks that followed, my mother's physical recovery progressed steadily, matched by a more tentative emotional healing between us. We talked more in those hospital days than we had in years, uncovering layers of misunderstanding and establishing new patterns of communication. Malcolm continued to text, his messages oscillating between righteous indignation at being shut out and transparent attempts to manipulate his way back into my mother's good graces. We established a boundary. I would read the messages to her, but she would decide if and when she wanted to respond. Most often, she chose silence, a response that would have been unthinkable before her heart attack. The day she was discharged, we faced the practical reality of her situation. As promised, I brought her to my apartment, helping her settle into the guest room that had previously served as my home office. It's not much, I apologized, watching her take in the modest space. But it's yours for as long as you need it. She sat on the edge of the bed, running her hand over the quilt I'd purchased specifically for her arrival. It's perfect, she said softly. More than I deserve. I sat beside her, the mattress dipping under our combined weight. We need to talk about next steps. Practical things. She nodded, a new resolution in her eyes. I've been thinking about that. I want to file a police report about the money Malcolm took. The statement shocked me. Never in a million years would I have expected her to take legal action against her golden child. Are you sure? I asked carefully. That would mean pressing charges against Malcolm. He could go to jail. She clasped her hands tightly in her lap. I know. And the thought breaks my heart. But what he did was wrong, criminal, even. And if I don't hold him accountable, I'm just continuing the pattern that got us here in the first place. Pride surged through me at her courage. I'll support whatever decision you make. There's more, she continued. I need to find a job. Something to contribute to the household, to start rebuilding my independence. I considered her situation, 63 years old, long out of the workforce, recovering from major surgery. That might be challenging. I know. But I need to try. Determination set her jaw in a line I recognized from my own mirror. I was an administrative assistant before you were born. Those skills must still be useful somewhere. We'll figure it out, I assured her. Together. That evening, as we shared a simple dinner at my small kitchen table, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Cassie, it's me. Malcolm's voice, slightly slurred. Need to talk to Mom. I glanced at her across the table, mouthing Malcolm silently. Her face tightened, but she nodded for me to continue the call. She's right here, but she doesn't want to talk to you right now, Malcolm. That's bullshit, he spat. Put her on the phone. I know you're poisoning her against me. I'm going to put you on speaker, I said evenly. Anything you want to say to Mom, you can say to both of us. I activated the speaker and set the phone on the table between us. Mom, he called, his voice taking on that wheedling tone I recognized from countless childhood manipulations. Mom, are you there? I've been so worried about you. My mother took a steadying breath. I'm here, Malcolm. Thank God, he exhaled dramatically. I've been trying to reach you for days. Cassie wouldn't tell me where you were. Because I asked her not to, she interrupted, her voice stronger than I expected. I needed time to recover. From the surgery and from what you did. There was a brief silence, then Malcolm's voice returned, defensive and slightly aggressive. Look, I know you're upset about the money. But you don't understand. I understand perfectly, she said, surprising me again with her firmness. You stole from me, Malcolm. You took money I worked my entire life to save. Money that was supposed to support me in my old age. I was going to pay you back, he protested. I had investments lined up that would have doubled your money. Then where is it? She asked simply. Where's the original money? Where's this miraculous return? Another silence, longer this time. There were complications. But I'm working on it. I just need a little more time, a little more capital to get things back on track. I couldn't hold back my bitter laugh. Let me guess, you want Mom to give you more money? Stay out of this, Cassie, he snapped. This is between me and Mom. No, Malcolm, my mother said, her voice steady. Cassandra stays. She's been here for me when you weren't. She's earned her place in this conversation. I felt a rush of warmth at her defense, a novel experience that momentarily left me speechless. Malcolm's tone turned pleading. Mom, please. I need your help. I'm in trouble. What kind of trouble? She asked, a hint of maternal concern creeping back into her voice. Just money troubles. Some people loaned me money, and they're not very patient about being paid back. I exchanged a glance with my mother, alarm bells ringing. Loan sharks? Not exactly, he hedged. Just private investors. With certain expectations. My mother closed her eyes briefly, pain etched across her face. When she opened them again, there was a resolve I'd rarely seen directed at Malcolm. I can't help you, Malcolm. Not with money. I don't have any left to give. But. No. The single word was firm, brooking no argument. What you did was wrong. It was illegal. And I can't keep pretending otherwise. Malcolm's voice turned cold. So that's it? After everything I've done for you, you're just going to abandon me when I need you most? I braced for my mother to cave, to fall back into her pattern of making excuses for him. Instead, she straightened her shoulders, voice clear and unwavering. What exactly have you done for me, Malcolm? Besides taking my money, breaking my heart, and disappearing when I nearly died? The blunt question hung in the air, unanswerable. This conversation is over, she concluded. I love you, Malcolm. I will always love you. But I can't help you avoid the consequences of your actions anymore. When you're ready to make real amends, not just ask for more money, we can talk again." She reached over and ended the call before he could respond. I stared at her, awestruck by this transformation. "Mom, that was incredible." She slumped back in her chair, suddenly looking every one of her 63 years. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done," she admitted, voice trembling. "Harder than the surgery, harder than losing your father." I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. "I'm proud of you." "It doesn't feel like something to be proud of," she said softly. "It feels like failure. Like I've abandoned him." "You haven't abandoned him," I assured her. "You've just stopped enabling him. There's a difference." She nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. "I spent so many years trying to protect him from pain, from consequences. And all I did was make him weaker, more entitled." She looked up at me, guilt shadowing her face. "While I made you fight for every scrap of attention, every bit of support. Is it any wonder you turned out stronger than both of us?" The assessment left me momentarily speechless. Never in my life had I expected to hear my mother acknowledge my strength, let alone attribute it to her own parenting failures. "I don't know if I'm stronger," I said finally. "Just different. I had to be." She squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry, Cassandra. For all of it. For making you the afterthought, the responsible one, the one who had to earn what Malcolm got for free." "I forgive you, Mom," I said simply. "I forgave you a long time ago." And I realized, with some surprise, that it was true. Somewhere along the line, the sharp edges of my resentment had worn smooth, leaving behind a wiser, more compassionate understanding of our family dynamics. My mother wiped away a tear, a small smile touching her lips. "Now we just have to figure out what comes next." What came next was a series of challenging, transformative months. True to her word, my mother filed a police report about the stolen funds. The detective assigned to the case was sympathetic but realistic about the chances of recovery. Most of the money was likely gone, spent on whatever lifestyle Malcolm had been living during his disappearance. Malcolm himself remained a ghost, occasionally surfacing with desperate texts or calls that grew increasingly hostile as he realized his usual manipulations weren't working. Eventually, he stopped contacting us altogether. My mother found purpose in volunteer work at the local community center, eventually securing a part-time administrative position that restored some of her financial independence. The simple dignity of earning her own way seemed to heal something in her that money alone couldn't have fixed. Through fall and into winter, we established new rhythms of coexistence. Our relationship, once defined by emotional distance and unspoken resentments, gradually transformed into something unexpected, a friendship built on mutual respect and genuine understanding. On a crisp January morning, as we shared coffee at the kitchen table that had become our confessional space, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Malcolm, thinner, unkempt, with dark circles beneath bloodshot eyes. "I need to talk to Mom," he said, not meeting my gaze. I stepped aside, letting him enter the apartment he'd never visited. My mother sat frozen, the mug halfway to her lips, as her prodigal son stood before her. What followed wasn't the dramatic reconciliation I'd half expected, nor the explosive confrontation I'd secretly feared. Instead, it was something more honest, a raw, halting conversation between a mother who had finally stopped enabling and a son beginning to understand the concept of consequences. Malcolm had come, not with excuses, but with something resembling genuine remorse. The money was indeed gone, spent on a lifestyle he couldn't sustain and debts he couldn't escape. He'd lost everything, including the false confidence that had once been his shield. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, staring at his hands. "But I wanted you to know I'm getting help. Counseling. And I'm working with the police, telling them everything." My mother reached across the table, not quite touching him. "That's a good start, Malcolm." I watched them, these two broken people trying to build something from the ruins of their relationship, and felt a strange peace settle over me. Not because everything was fixed, it wasn't, and might never be fully repaired, but because the truth had finally broken through decades of pretense. In saving my mother's life, I had somehow saved something of my own, the hope that families, even ones as fractured as ours, could learn to heal.